Hello, and welcome to Public Affairs Now, our super local look at what's going on in the Maryland General Assembly and the Arundel County Council. In this episode, we will update you on the State House as they enter the final days of the legislative session. Today, we welcome back Len Lazarick from MarylandReporter.com, and we also have a special guest, House Minority Leader Nick Kipke. Thank you both for joining us today. We only have a few days left in the session, but the budget is still up in the air. Can you give us an overview of what's happening, Len?
Well, what's happening is a bit of a standoff. The legislative committees and the floor has taken action on the governor's budget, but to finish what the committees and most of the Democratic legislators would like, the governor has to submit a supplemental budget that will give more funding to education and guarantee state employee pay raises. And he hasn't done that yet because he'd like to see them take more positive action on his agenda. So as we're taping this, which will run a little bit later, we're still in the standoff, and Delegate Kipke might have a better idea where we stand, although I don't have a sense that anybody really knows exactly where it is. It's a bit of a game of chicken at this point. You know, who's going to move first? But I think the cards actually favor the governor on this one ultimately. I don't think he'll get everything he wants, but if he doesn't get anything that he wants, well, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, you know, one great thing about having a Republican governor in a state like Maryland is you finally have checks and balances. And Marylanders have been saying for years that they want their taxes reduced, and they want our state spending to be reined in. And he introduced a budget that'll do that. It did not please many of the establishment leaders here in the Democratic majority legislature. But he has expressed his willingness to work together, to compromise and to find common ground. And so he's willing to work with them, but so far they've been very reluctant to take action on it in very small but meaningful steps, especially related to tax relief for retirees. So, you know, I think he does hold the cards. Maryland's governor has the strongest budget authority in the whole country. And therefore, you know, I would say that before session ends, hopefully Monday night, and it's not extended, cooler heads will prevail and a compromise will be reached that will achieve tax relief for Maryland and also the additional education dollars that I think we all support, but it's definitely something that's being debated in the last hours of session.
And the problem was down here below us in the House. The Senate has been far more accommodating and has taken more action on the governor's agenda than the House of Delegates has. So, you know, we'll see if there's any give on the House. As I talk to Democratic legislators, there still hasn't been quite the attitude shift that you might have expected.
Yeah, I think some have expressed an interest in working with the governor, but the power structure here is kind of suppressing that a little. So it's an interesting dynamic that's going on, but I'm optimistic that with the governor's business background, the desire on both sides to make a difference for taxes and for education, I think we'll be able to achieve the people's goals before session's over.
It seemed pretty unusual that the state Senate would pass a budget unanimously. That doesn't happen very often. But then everything changed. What happened, Delegate Kipke?
Well, I mean, frankly, the governor's budget as introduced is a budget that is the second lowest rate of growth in the last 40 years. It's a very modest budget. It's essential because the former governor left us with an enormous black hole that needed to be filled. A structural deficit occurs every year here. In addition to that, you know, obviously our economy isn't growing the way that we would like. So the governor introduced a budget that was sound. The legislature did make some changes to it. Republicans weren't perfectly happy with all of those changes, quite frankly. But I will tell you, you know, Republicans are constantly criticized as not willing to work together, not willing to compromise, not willing to cut a deal for the good of the bigger picture. And I'll tell you, we worked together, and many of us supported that budget, despite the fact that it wasn't perfect. Both the House and the Senate did overwhelmingly pass the budget. And that's a sign of good faith. The Republicans here, from the governor's leadership on down, are saying to the Democratic leaders, we want to work together. One of the essential aspects of that, though, is tax relief for all Marylanders. And until we achieve that, it's only a one-sided deal. Marylanders want tax relief. We're standing up for them. And that's the last piece of this puzzle to get this session finished in a positive way.
What do you make of this, Len? You predicted the bipartisanship wouldn't last at the beginning of the session in January. Where do we stand now in terms of the governor and the General Assembly working together?
Well, first of all, the bipartisanship was really prospective. It was promised, we'll work together. And ultimately, in regard to the budget, by the way, the last time the Senate voted on it unanimously was in the second and third years of the Ehrlich administration. So it has happened before. We're not used to having it happen. It wasn't unanimous in the House. 10 of Delegate Kipke's Republicans, including 7 veterans, voted against it. But 40 Republicans did vote for it. Just things are generally more partisan than they were some years ago. The Democratic majority is further to the left. I don't know as the Republicans are at the highest number they've ever had in the history of Maryland in the House with 50 members. I don't know as they're further to the right, although there are a couple of the new delegates who are who like to vote against a lot of things that even their Republican colleagues do. So bipartisanship is harder to achieve. And some of the memories of this bipartisanship, when Mike Miller talks about it, well, those were back in the days where in the Senate there were only 7 or 8 Republicans. So, I mean, they had to work with the Democrats to get anything at all. And now that there are larger numbers, it's, I think it's a little bit harder for them to cope with the numbers that you have.
Yeah, so we're working together to build bipartisan relationships in the House of Delegates. We're successful, I would say, generally on an individual basis. But unfortunately, when the machine gets moving, it's difficult to stop it. And I see a new era, though, an era of opportunity for Republicans and Democrats in the General Assembly. The most important aspect of that is having a Republican governor who is that check and balance here that we didn't have in the past. Things were hotly partisan under the O'Malley years, and unfortunately we weren't able to vote for budgets and we weren't able to vote for many things, but now we're forced to come together and try to work out differences, and I think that's very healthy for the taxpayers of Maryland.
And I think you would have to say that there's much more bipartisanship in committee, and particularly the committee that you serve on. It's my understanding, that's Health and Government Operations, that there's a pretty open atmosphere there, and you've been on it for a while.
Yeah, so much of it is about personality and leadership style. The leaders of different committees have reputations. Some are more bipartisan than others, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us, me as the leader of the Republicans in the House, the Speaker. He has a great opportunity to bring Marylanders together behind a mission that reduces taxes and gets our state finances in line, grows our economy, and we want to support him with that.
Delegate Kipke, every week the county delegation meets to discuss local issues. Could you give us a brief review of where we stand on issues of local importance in the final days?
Well, Anne Arundel County focused on many bills this year. One of the bills that I think is meaningful to the majority of the county is a group that has been put together to finally take a serious look at the Crownsville property. It's an enormous swath of land down the middle of our county. It's basically sitting vacant. There's a few nonprofits on that land, and we need to find a way to use that property that meets all the interests of the stakeholders, and that's what the bill did. Delegate McConkey passed legislation that brought all the different stakeholders, local residents, organizations that care about that property, as well as different groups that would be affected by any development or changes to the property. I think that's significant. Also, in Anne Arundel County, like most of the rest of the state, we are truly facing an epidemic of heroin use. It's resulting in many deaths of our citizens, and obviously all the other terrible things that are associated with that. So we were successful in passing legislation that's actually statewide legislation. County Executive Hsu was helpful in passing legislation to allow for our police, first responders, and also other citizens to respond with things like Narcan. We're also looking at ways to counter the epidemic through our law enforcement in a more comprehensive way. So I think that consumed a lot of the debate this year in the Anne Arundel County delegation, is how can we really take this problem seriously. It's not that we were looking the other way, but the problem has become so severe. We're losing so many citizens, and the side effects of heroin use, whether it's crime or folks ending up in our emergency rooms, is really a cost to society. And we, in a bipartisan fashion, are giving it our all to resolve this problem to the best of our ability.
You always see an issue come out of nowhere, Len. What is palcohol?
Oh, palcohol. That's powdered alcohol. I think it surprised a lot of people. It's clearly been going through a process because the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, approved its sale, and the controller, so it's powdered alcohol. So you can have a relatively small packet of it in your pocket, and you bring in a bottle of water, you pour it in a bottle of water, and suddenly you got something like vodka. I have no idea what it tastes like, but in any case, the controller has gotten a voluntary ban on it by liquor salespeople, and there are various aspects of, there are a couple of different bills banning it for a period of time going through the legislature. One of those is probably going to pass. We'll have to see. What happens with that. Where do you think we're going to wind up on that?
Well, it's interesting that the legislature is decriminalizing and moving towards legalizing marijuana, and on the other hand, we're criminalizing the sale of this powdered alcohol. I think it's retailers and restaurants don't like it because you could bring in the little packet and slip it in your drink. People complain that it could be slipped into drinks at parties. So I think the consensus is that until we really understand the implications of this powdered alcohol, to delay its being made available in Maryland, and I think that's a pretty bipartisan sentiment right now.
Delegate Kipke, you hold a very high position in the party structure of the legislature. Can you tell us what is different about your job this year as opposed to last year?
Well, it's like a breath of fresh air, honestly. After 8 years of serving in the legislature under the O'Malley administration, I found that, as I've said earlier today, having Hogan as our governor, we've been able to see a much greater sense of bipartisanship on an individual basis. He forces compromise among the leaders of this assembly, and so I'm thrilled about that. In addition to that, we have record high membership in the General Assembly. Even after the terrible, embarrassing gerrymandering that we had with our redistricting, when we had 43 members last year, we defeated 7 and came back at 50. That defeats the supermajority that the Democrats have in the House of Delegates. And frankly, I think it gives us greater leverage here to get our voice heard. Every committee picks up 1 or 2 additional Republicans. And I'll say, of the people who came into this legislature after this last election, many of them are, I would say, very real, down-to-earth people who have, whether it's business background, real-life experience, they're accomplished in their own way. In other words, they're not sort of career politician types. And I think that's a real win for Marylanders. They're people who came to the legislature interested in making a difference. And I think that helps us, again, with this bipartisan sentiment. People are tired and fed up of a government that does not work. And we have the opportunity to make it work, and we're working very hard to do that. So I would say the leverage that that Marylanders gave us with increased numbers in the General Assembly helps produce a better product for all Marylanders. And of course, having a Republican governor has truly created a check and balance system that's very helpful for us. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I think all people want our General Assembly to be working in a way that is not hotly partisan and really focuses on solving issues.
And what you also see in some of these votes, there have been a number of votes in the last few days where the opposition is like 55, 56 votes, and that's 5 or 6 Democrats and 4 of them from Anne Arundel County, as a matter of fact. If you just looked at Anne Arundel County, you would have a Republican majority here, except it's Democrats voting with the Republicans. So there really is a change in atmosphere, and what they have to think about, as they did with the travel tax, they got to be thinking, what is the governor going to do? I mean, he's just not going to automatically say, oh, another tax. Well, that's fine. And that tax did not pass with a veto-proof majority. They're a couple of votes shy. So. It is a different atmosphere, but it is not as confrontational as it was in the early years, and that's partly due to the attitude of the governor.
So we mentioned that these are the final days of the session, but then again, there's a possibility that the legislators might stay a little longer. Is that right, Len?
Well, there is a part of the Constitution. The legislature is supposed to pass the budget a week before the end of session. They actually never do. Both houses have taken action on it. They differ. They have a conference committee to resolve their differences. They haven't moved very far on that because they're waiting to see what the governor does. But I was talking to a member of the governor's staff yesterday, and he was saying, well, the governor says, well, they want to stay a few extra days. I live just right across the street. It's okay with me. The proclamation is if they don't have the budget passed by midnight on Monday, then they can continue to meet, but only to work on the budget. So again, it's an example where the governor really has the upper hand here on some of these issues. And I think he would like to resolve things happily and not butt heads, but I don't think he's going to roll over.
Well, gentlemen, we'll either talk to you again after the session is over or during the final days of an extended session. Who knows? Thank you again to our guests, House Minority Leader Nick Kipke and Len Lazarick. You can read Len's dispatches from Annapolis by subscribing to MarylandReporter.com. You also can like his Facebook page for regular updates. We'll see you next time.